Morning, Year 11. So just a very quick reminder that this session is being recorded and it will be possible to re-watch this session on the Washwood Heath Academy English Department YouTube channel. The link to that YouTube channel is displayed at the bottom of the screen. The link will also be posted to show my homework along with the PowerPoint and resources that we've used during today's session. So this is Miss Chamberlain here, and we're going to start with a look at English Language Paper 1. Straight after this session, there will be a second session on English Language Paper 2, and it will be necessary for you to leave this meeting and join the second meeting to be able to attend that. So I'm just going to give a couple of moments to allow everyone who's wanting to join, and then we will make a start. You will find it useful to have a piece of paper and a pen to make some notes as we go through the session today. Okay then, so let's make a start. Just a reminder for those of you who've joined us, this session is being recorded and it will be possible to re-watch this session on our YouTube channel. Links for that will be added to show my homework along with any resources that we've used today. So we're going to start by looking at English Language Paper 1. So just a quick reminder that English Language Paper 1 is taking place on Wednesday, the 18th of May, and it will be in the morning. It is an hour and 45 minutes in length, and it is divided into two sections. Section A, where you're assessed on your reading ability, and Section B, where you're assessed on your writing ability. The total mark for this paper is 80, and there are 40 marks available for Section A and 40 marks available for Section B. You are reminded that you need to write neatly throughout this exam to ensure that examiners can read your work and award marks as appropriate. Within the hour and 45 minutes, you're advised to spend approximately 15 minutes reading through the source to make sure that you are familiar with that. And my recommendation is that you get in there and to settle your nerves, you read the short part of extract required for question 1, you answer question 1, then you read all the way through the extract, and then you continue to complete question 2, 3 and 4 before moving on to question 5. Today, however, in the time that we've got together, we're just going to revise 3 main questions that students have expressed as areas of concern during feedback sessions. And those 3 questions are going to be question 3, which is the structure question, question 4, which is the evaluation question, and question 5, which is the writing to describe or narrate. So let's begin with question 3. So before we have a look at question 3, it is important that we read through the extract in its entirety. We will have read that extract before we've answered question 2. Okay, so by the time you get to question 3, you should perhaps be on your second rereading of it. Remember as well that at the top of every extract, there's a little bit of information given to ensure that you understand what type of text it is that you're reading and where that text has come from. So this extract is from the first chapter of a novel by a writer called Donna Tartt, and this is from the novel The Goldfinch. Things would have turned out better if my mother had lived. As it was, she died when I was a kid. And though everything that's happened to me since then is thoroughly my own fault, still, when I lost her, I lost sight of any landmark that might have led me someplace happier, to some more populated or congenial life. Her death, the dividing mark before and after. And though it's a bleak thing to admit all these years later, still I've never met anyone who made me feel loved the way that she did. Everything came alive in her company. She cast a charmed theatrical light about her, so that to see anything through her eyes was to see it in brighter colours than ordinary. I remember a few weeks before she died eating a late supper with her at an Italian restaurant down in the village, and how she grasped my sleeve at the sudden, almost painful loveliness of a birthday cake with lit candles being carried in procession from the kitchen. Faint circle of light wavering in dark across the dark ceiling, and then the cake set down to blaze amidst the family beatifying an old lady's face. Smiles all round, waiters stepping away with their hands behind their backs. Just an ordinary birthday dinner you might see anywhere in an inexpensive downtown restaurant. And I'm sure I wouldn't even remember it had she not died so soon after. But I thought about it again and again after her death, and indeed I'll probably think about it all my life, that candle-lit circle, a tableau vivant of the daily commonplace happiness that was lost when I lost her. She was beautiful too. That's almost secondary, but still she was. When she came to New York, fresh from Kansas, she worked part-time as a model, though she was too uneasy in front of the camera to be very good at it. Whatever she had, it didn't translate to film. And yet she was wholly herself, a rarity. I cannot recall ever seeing another person who really resembled her. She had black hair, fair skin that freckled in summer, china blue eyes with a lot of light in them. And in the slant of her cheekbones there was such an eccentric mixture of the tribal and the Celtic twilight that sometimes people guessed she was Icelandic. In fact, she was half Irish, half Cherokee, from a town in Kansas near the Oklahoma border. And she liked to make me laugh by calling herself an Okie, even though she was as glossy and nervy and stylish as a racehorse. That exotic character unfortunately comes out a little too stark and unforgiving in photographs. Her freckles covered with makeup, her hair pulled back in a ponytail at the nape of her neck like some nobleman in the tale of Janji. And what doesn't come across at all is her warmth, her merry, unpredictable quality, which is what I loved about her most. It is clear from the stillness she emanates in pictures how much she mistrusted the camera. She gives off a watchful, tigerish air of steeling herself against attack, but in life she wasn't like that. She moved with a thrilling quickness, just as sudden and light, always perched on the edge of her chair like some long, elegant marsh bird, about to startle and fly away. I love the sandalwood perfume she wore, rough and unexpected, and I love the rustles of her starched shirt when she swooped down to kiss me on the forehead. And her laugh was enough to make you want to kick over what you were doing and follow her down the street. Wherever she went, men looked at her out of the corner of her eyes, and sometimes they used to look at her in a way that bothered me. So by the time you get to question 3, that should be the second time that you've read the text through in its entirety. And that time would obviously come out of those allocated 15 minutes for reading. Now, as you're reading it for the second time, you should already have had in your mind ideas of things that you would need to pick out in structure, potentially what's happening at the beginning of the extract, how your attention shifts to a different focus, or even what is happening at the end of a text. Remember, question 3 always has the same format. It will say, you now need to think about the whole of the source. That's not to say you have to write about the whole of the source, but it's telling you that you can take ideas from anywhere in this text for this question. It will also remind you of where the extract comes from. So in this instance, it tells us that the extract comes from the opening chapter of a novel. And then it tells us this: how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? And there are 2 key elements to this question. Okay, the first here is the how. So how has the writer structured the text? So this means that you need to be looking at the structural devices that the writer has used, how they've used those. Okay, so the methods, the structural methods that they're using. And then the next bit is to interest you as a reader. And the key word here is interest. Okay, so what has this writer done to continue to keep you interested in the text that you are reading? No writer in the history of the world has written something because they want their reader to put it down and never pick it up again. Okay, so every single writer will have employed some structural devices to make you want to read on. That's not to say when you're writing about this, you should say this makes the reader want to read on, because that isn't going to get you any marks. It's what we would say is a null point. Okay, it's obvious. Instead, you need to explain why you find it interesting, why you find it intriguing, why it creates a sense of mystery, why it makes you feel anxious or excited or engaged or afraid. So what you're really explaining is how has the writer structured this text to make you think and feel certain emotions. Now you've got bullet points within this question, and they will say things like how does the writer, what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. Please remember, this is an 8-mark question and you should not spend any longer than 10 minutes on it. So what I'm going to show you today is a very quick way of answering this question to get 5 to 6 marks in 10 minutes that will allow you to move on and then focus on question 4. Okay, so my first top tip, I suppose, for this is to keep it simple. So think about these 3 things. What is our attention directed to at the start of this passage, and why is that important? How does this passage develop and then shift our perspective, and why is that significant? And what is our attention directed to at the end of the passage? And again, why is this important? So you're really considering what the writer is trying to get you to think, feel, or imagine. The writer is trying to manipulate you throughout this text. And in this instance, you're being asked how the writer uses structure to do that. You need to try and keep it physical and not linguistic. So what I mean by physical here is what's happening on the page in front of you. How is it controlling the way that you engage with it? Not the words that are being used, but the actual organisation and structural devices and techniques. So, for example, if we're looking at this extract that we've just read, then you might consider, why focus on the fact that at the beginning of the extract, the mother is dead? Why give us that information? What does it make us think, feel, or imagine? Why does it interest us in the extract that we're going to read? Why does the writer then switch to a memory of his mother's birthday? Why does the writer show us that information? What does the writer want us to think, feel, or imagine about the relationship between the narrator and his mother? Why does this extract end with a description of his mother? What's he trying to make sure that we recognise in terms of the relationship between them, in terms of how important his mother was to him? Why end with that description rather than start with it? Why does it interest us? What does it make us think? What does it make us feel? What does it make us imagine? Now, another thing I've noticed from marking hundreds of these recently is the fact that students don't always know how to answer this question because you don't know how to move between the question and between the points that you're making in answer to the question. So you might find some sentence starters such as this helpful. At the start of the extract, Tart focuses the reader's attention on and then where I've put in the brackets perspective shift, that's where you can specifically explore whatever shift is being offered to you, causes the reader to, or as the passage begins to develop, we consider. By shifting our attention to something, the reader perhaps begins to ask. And then finally, by using some of those sentence starters, what you're doing is you're building up a response that's going to assist you. So what I want to do very quickly is just do a little bit of modelling so that you can see how we might use some of those sentence starters to help us structure a response. I'm just going to switch the screen over to the visualizer, so please do bear with me. Okay, so you can see here that we've got the copy of the extract that we were looking at, and we're just going to think very quickly about question 3. Now remember, we've asked ourselves already what our attention is being directed to at the beginning, what our attention is directed to, and how that shifts, and what it is at the end. And that's what we're using to start us off here. So we're going to start by saying, at the start of this extract, Tart focuses the reader's attention on the absence of the narrator's mother. And her death. So that's our what statement. What does the writer focus our attention on at the beginning? Now, you can give a line reference or you can do a quick quotation. So here I'm just going to give a quick quotation. Things would have turned out better if my mother had lived. So we've got the what and we've got the how. And now is the important bit here, the why. But remember, you are not explaining the language devices that are being used. You're explaining why that focus on the absence of the narrator's mother and the revelation that she's dead, why that interests us. Why does it make us want to read on? So we might just say something like, this focus on her absence is intriguing for the reader as we question how his life may have been different and we may wonder how his mother died. So we've got a very straightforward paragraph here. At the start of the extract, Tart focuses the reader's attention on the absence of the narrator's mother and her death. That is our what statement. So what does the writer focus our attention on? That's what she focuses our attention on. We've then got the how section. So things would have turned out better if my mother had lived. And we could say that that's a very shocking statement. So we've then got this focus on her absence is intriguing for the reader as we question how his life may have been different, and we may wonder how his mother died. Now that's the first part of that question. The second part of answering it is that we link those ideas together. And so to do that, we need to really explore that idea. So we may then say, let me just move that up for you. So as the extract progresses, Tart shifts our focus to a vivid description of a memory the narrator has of his mother. Now, this is a much larger section of text. Therefore, we don't want to waste any time quoting. By just saying a description of the memory he has of his mother, that's enough of a reference to explain why that's important. So then we might say, as the passage continues, to explore this memory, the reader begins to understand the significance of the relationship between his mother Now, we would then obviously go on to continue to explore this. But what we've got here is we've got the what at the extract that shifts our focus to a vivid description of the memory of his narrator, his mother. And we've then got that explanation. To explore the memory, the reader begins to understand the significance of the relationship between him and his mother. And we therefore begin to understand how her death would have affected him. So what's this writer doing to interest us? Well, the writer's describing the mother through the version of a core memory, and it's telling us that they were close, that therefore the breakdown of that her death would cause a breakdown in his future. That's the first two sections. The third paragraph that you would need to write, therefore, is just going to focus on the ending. So we might say, finally, the writer shifts our focus to a description of his mother's beauty. And in this instance, it would be appropriate to use a quotation again. And we've got loads of ideas that we have there. Quite a few, in fact. But we only need to take a very short one. So, for example, wherever she went, men looked at her. Now, remember, you do not need to analyse the language in this quotation. And that's often a mistake that students make. Even if they've started off focused really clearly on structure, they end up falling into language analysis. Do not do that. So finally, the writer shifts our focus to a description of his mother's beauty. Wherever she went, men looked at her. By ending with this attention shift, the writer is signposting how beautiful the narrator thinks his mother was. and may make us consider that he has placed her as a figure of great importance. Which therefore leads the reader to question, as they did at the beginning, how the writer's life, how the narrator's life might have been different. So that answer is going to get you 5 out of 8, okay? It's not going to set the world on fire, it's not groundbreaking, but it focuses absolutely on the extract and it focuses only on structure, and therefore it is going to allow you to pick up marks for structure, okay? 5 out of 8 in 10 minutes is a perfectly acceptable score on this question, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are going to be able to move forward quickly onto question 4, and it's that part, question 4, which we're going to focus on now. So that was a very quick walkthrough of question 3. When it comes to question 4, you need to remember that you are being asked to evaluate the text that is in front of you. So question 4 will say, focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 18 to the end. A student having read this section of the text said, the description is so vivid that the character of the mother really seems to come to life. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could write about your own impressions of the mother, evaluate how the writer has created these impressions, and support your opinions with references to the text. It is a 20-mark question, and therefore you want to be spending 25 minutes on this question, providing a really clear and analytical point of view. So that's probably the most important thing I can remind you of here, is that you need to express a clear and analytical point of view about that statement that you're being given. And you need to justify your point of view through a detailed discussion. And by a detailed discussion, I mean that you've selected a number of diveable images. That's images that you're going to be able to drill down into to really explore and write about carefully. That's the bit that you're evaluating. How has the writer created a vivid description? How has that vivid description made the mother appear like she's come to life? Those are the elements that you're going to be exploring, in this answer. So this is the section that you're being asked to consider. She was beautiful too. That's almost secondary, but still she was. When she came to New York fresh from Kansas, she worked part-time as a model, though she was too uneasy in front of the camera to be very good at it. Whatever she had, it didn't translate to film. So from that section all the way down to the end, okay? That will be the last thing that you've just written about when it comes to question 3. And what you're needing to think about here are the 2 parts of the statement that's been presented to you. So if we divide that statement into 2 sections, we have statement A, the description is so vivid, and statement B, that the character of the mother really seems to come to life. And within that, you need to be able to select 3 key ideas for each element of the statement. That's going to be the section that you're drawing on to enable you to be writing about it. So I would strongly recommend that for this question, you spend 5 minutes planning your response. And that plan does not have to be anything more detailed than this table that I've got here displayed on the screen. And that table is simply divided into the description is so vivid and mother seems to come to life. Now, one of the really good things about this table is that if you spend the 5 minutes using it, if you spend just those 5 minutes filling it out, that plan that you will have created provides you with everything you need to be able to answer the question. Okay, so I'm just going to switch back over to the visualizer so I can explain that alongside an example. So apologies that I'm switching between multiple screens. So you can see here that I've got my plan very roughly done. So the description is so vivid and the mother seems to come to life. Now for each of these columns, I need to find at least 2, if not 3, quotations or ideas that support it. So I need some ideas of how the description is really vivid. And so for me, one thing that tells me that is that she had fair skin, that freckled in summer. That's one quotation, which I think is a really vivid description. And the reason why I'd be able to write about that is I'd be able to write about the fair, I'd be able to write about the idea of freckling, and I'd be able to write about the concept of summer. So for me, that is a diveable image that tells me of a really vivid description. I might also explain that I might, for example, look at that idea about her cheekbones, but I'm going to go for guessed she was Icelandic. And I'm going to choose that example because for me, that again is something that makes it really vivid. And I'm going to talk about how that idea of Iceland helps me. Now, we haven't got a huge amount of time left, so I'm just going to do 2 examples for each because I want to do a little bit of modelling of the writing as well. Now I need to pick out some quotation that suggests that she comes to life. And this is potentially a little bit more difficult because how we each interpret a character coming to life may be slightly different. But for me, it's things like the rustle of her starched shirt. Or potentially that reference to her laughter or the sandalwood perfume. And I've chosen these because each of these describe a sense beyond that of sight, okay? And for me, that's how a character is brought to life. Now, the clever thing that we've got here is that in doing this planning, we've got our ideas for our introduction and our discussion paragraphs. So remember, it's always going to be easier to agree with the statement. So if we wrote our introduction, we might write something like, I wholeheartedly agree with the student's statement tart does create, and then if I look here, a description so vivid, and then the second bit, that the mother seems to come to life. So already I've written something that's going to get me some marks for this question, okay? So this one statement, I wholeheartedly agree with the student's statement. Tart does create a description so vivid that the mother seems to come to life. It's not going to get me loads of marks, 2, maybe 3, but I've already started scoring marks on this question. And if I get 2 marks for this, that's already 2/5 of potentially what I've got in the previous question as well. And this exam is about marginal gains, making sure that we do slightly better on every single question. So if you didn't answer question 4, just writing something as simple as this will pick you up some marks. But we need more than 2 marks, okay? So the next thing we need to do is we need to take the ideas that we've got here. Now I would suggest that you do one idea from here, one idea from here, another idea from here, and another idea from here, and that you do an evaluative paragraph on each of those. So I'm just going to do one example of that because I do also want to look at some question 5 today. So we've said, I wholeheartedly agree with the student's statement. Tart does create a description so vivid that the mother seems to come to life. And then I'm going to say, Tart, and we're evaluating. So we're going to use some evaluative adverbs to help us answer this question, okay? So Tart cleverly, I'm evaluating. Tart cleverly employs adjectives to describe the mother's skin as being fair and freckled. And you can see here that I've used embedded quotations that's going to allow me to come back and analyse the keywords. By using those embedded quotations, I'm also showing the examiner that I know how an embedded quotation works. So, Tart cleverly employs adjectives to describe the mother's skin as being fair and freckled. And then I'm going to say the adjective fair has connotations of both pigmentation and beauty. Now I could leave it there, okay, but that's not going to get me enough marks. Instead, I need to really explore what I mean by this idea of pigmentation and beauty. So I've said here, the adjective fair has connotations of both pigmentation and beauty. Often, people consider fair skin as a, and then I would go on to explore perhaps the ideals that were often presented with in magazines and so on. Okay, likewise, I might, fair skin as a sign of beauty, and I should have said, and innocence. And one of the reasons people think this is because if skin is fair, it would suggest that they've not been outside working a lot, and therefore it might suggest that they're more affluent or that they're more innocent and protected in a way. We then might say, furthermore, freckled suggests, and I am going to stop there, but we would go on to explain what it is about the word freckled and how that also has connotations of beauty, of being, you know, a beauty mark or something within a beauty industry that considers something of that nature, especially because he talks about his mother being a model in some sort. So I'm just going to switch back now to the other screen. So I apologise that I'm switching again between the two. Bear with me, I'm sorry. just going to slide right over. So question 4 is worth 20 marks. That means it's worth 25% of your overall paper, and therefore doing a little bit of planning before doing your writing is going to give you everything you need to enable you to write. Once you've done that, you should then consider looking at question 5. Now, question 5 states that you should spend 45 minutes on this question. That means that you would have spent 1 hour on section A. That includes 45 minutes worth of answering time and 15 minutes worth reading time. Okay, so that's why I suggest you go in, you read the first section, you do question 1, you read it all the way through, 10 minutes on question 2, read it all the way through again, 10 minutes on question 3, read it all through again, or sorry, just read the key section again, and then 25 minutes on question 4. That then will be an hour. That leaves you 45 minutes to do your creative writing. It is really important that you remember that you are marked on 2 different disciplines in this question. There are 24 marks for content and organisation and 16 marks for technical accuracy. If you do not focus on technical accuracy at all, you are not going to move yourself beyond the marks required for a grade 3. No matter how good your storytelling is, if you don't pay attention to some things like spelling, punctuation and grammar, your story is going to be difficult to read, and therefore you are going to miss out on key marks. Therefore, as a very minimum, you must ensure that your writing is organised into paragraphs, that you correctly use full stops, capital letters, and that you have a range of vocabulary. That's how you're going to pick up as many of those accuracy marks as possible. For those of you that want to get 12 and above marks for the technical accuracy, you also need to make sure that you know how to use things such as colons, semicolons, speech marks, commas, exclamation marks. You need to show that you've got a mastery of a wide range. Okay, the content and organisation, those marks mostly come from a story or a description that is logically sequenced and engaging to read. Now, you'll always be given a choice of 2 questions. So in this one, we've got write a description suggested by this picture, or write the opening of a story with the title The Outsider. Now, you may have ideas that you've used previously in creative writing that you want to recreate in here. That's fine. You just need to make sure that they meet the brief in some way. And so what we're going to do today is we're just going to look at a couple of ways that you might plan your response to one of these questions. So it is really important that you spend some time planning out what you're going to include. Now, previously, we've looked at this idea of there being a drop, shift, zoom in, zoom out and leave. That's your basic planning, and it also provides you with the structure that you're going to write. So if you decide that you're going to write a description suggested by this picture, excuse me, then you want to begin with your drop. Now, your drop should have some sense of movement. You then need to shift focus. You will notice from doing the reading section that writers do always shift focus. So you need to make sure that you do the same. So start with some movement, some action, something you're going to be able to hook your reader with. Then you're going to shift. Could be to a flashback, could be a flash forward, could be to a different time or place. If you've gone for the description of this character, you might shift between the 2 different characters that you've got here. You then need to zoom in on something, and that zoom in needs to be something, again, that's engaging. It can be a specific detail. It could be a specific feeling. It could be a specific moment. But it's almost like you're taking a pair of binoculars or your phone camera and you're zooming in and in and in to focus on something much smaller. Your next section is your zoom out. So again, if you think about this in terms of your phone camera, you're zooming all the way out to include more detail. And then leave is how you finish it off. So this is your structure that you're going to use, and following that structure is the most basic way to organise a text. But you may find that that only leaves you with a structure, and it could be a little bit limited for you. So instead, there are some prompts that I would also encourage you to use to help you think about your planning. And by using some of these prompts, you're going to be able to round out your description or your narrative in a way that's going to help you pick up more marks for that content and organisation. So let's assume that you're going for the opening of a story called The Outsider. The first question you ask yourself is what is the point of view that you're going to adopt? So what that's asking you is, are you going to write a first or third person narrative? Are you going to be the outsider that you're writing about? Or is it going to be a different character? So when I say you, I mean as in the first person you, okay? So that's your first decision, first or third person, and is it the narrator telling you the story about themselves, or are you learning about the story of someone else? The next thing to consider is the point of view of your narrator or of the protagonist. Are they feeling sad or happy? Are they reminiscing? Are they looking forward to something? How are they feeling in your piece of writing? And then you need to think, well, what might happen in this shift? If I'm writing a first person story and I'm angry, what's going to happen in that drop? Am I going to be in a situation that's causing some distress, that's causing some anger, that's causing some frustration, for example? What's going to happen in the shift? What am I going to move to? What am I going to focus on next? Think about the text that you've read in preparation for this exam for question 3. How do they shift? Think about that story with Alice, okay? We start off in the car with them in that action. It's third person. Alice is essentially the outsider in that story. So we start with the action. She then leaves, it shifts from being inside the van to outside the van to Alice being alone. Those are the things that you can think about, okay? You can see that Alice story really fits this idea of being an outsider because of the way that she's being treated. So do play around with ideas such as that. Plan as well what you're going to include in your Zoom. What's going to happen at the end? And for those of you who want to aim higher, there are also the opportunity to include reoccurring motifs or symbols or phrases. Being able to start and end a story in a cyclical way may be a really positive move. It may really support you. Okay, so when it comes to this question, I cannot emphasize enough how important the planning device really is. And if you are someone who struggles with your planning, then use these prompt questions to support you. Okay, really consider the point of view, because all of those elements will help you come up with ideas. So alongside your 50-day revision plan that you are working along, you can take the questions from this session. They're also going to be on Show My Homework. This video, again, like I said, is going to be on YouTube. You can have a go at any of the questions that's been offered to you today, or even the questions that haven't been offered to you, to help you practice. If your creative writing is an area that you really need to work on, I highly recommend that you do one of these questions as a practice using a planning device to help you. Now, tomorrow at 12 o'clock, I'm doing another session, which is going to again focus on this question and also a transactional writing question. And I'm going to look at some of the quick wins and the top tips and the things you can do to really help you do better on the writing sections. Everything I go through tomorrow is very much going to focus on how you can get a grade 7 and above on your creative and transactional writing. So that's been a very quick revision this morning on paper 1. Just a reminder again that paper 1 is taking place on the on the 18th of May in the morning, that it is a paper marked out of 80, that there are 40 marks available for section A, and that there are 40 marks available for section B. That section A focuses on your reading and that section B focuses on your writing. Like I've said, this video will be on YouTube for you to refer to again. The paper that I've referenced today is going to be uploaded to show my homework, so you've got that tool to continue to add to your revision if you wish. Okay, that's the end of this session. There's a second session starting in about 7 minutes, which is going to do paper 2. You're going to need to leave this chat to join the other one to get in for paper 2. And those of you who are interested in the grade 7 work, please join me tomorrow at 12 to look at that. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next session, I hope. Thank you, and I will see you soon.